Hello, good to see you. Welcome back to DevSavar. So I have a story for you, and you'd think after 30 years or so of software development, I would know better. Alas, what can you say? So let's go back to the start. There is a product that's out that's already, it's approaching the release date, and then there are some final requirements that are found, like the week before release, that we go, well, we really want these changes to go out to the customer. But in order to do all the testing, it takes a couple of weeks, right? So the idea is that, well, let's go and try just like a subset of the tests. And there's no way that, it'll break if we just make this one little change. And it did. It broke. There was two platforms. There was an iOS platform and an Android platform. I'm not going to go into details about the project, but basically I made some code changes, and those code changes were tested for a small subset of what we thought would be what was required. But there was one case which was like one of the main cases, and it was kind of skipped over because we felt like it's not going to happen in the real world. This is like how we're testing between one case to the second case. But there was one that was kind of like in the middle that was skipped. And so, these releases went out into production, and then after the fact, it was like, well, we still need to do these additional full-scale tests, and they were started, and it was this assumption that everything would be fine, and no, it wasn't fine. The case that they tested, the first case on only one platform, not like it was iOS and Android, but one platform was fine. The other had a problem. You could not do this particular core thing that you needed to do in the app. So I found the problem. I fixed it. I uploaded onto release. But for some reason, in the 5 days, Google had decided to change their policies. And so we are fighting like at the last minute, making changes, tweaks, trying to get this build out. The feeling of a product being out in production and where you're the one responsible for it not working, and customers are about to use it. So it's like there's like this small window of time you have to get it out. I was working with another guy, really great Android and iOS dev, and we were up probably all night trying to get around the issues with the testing and making sure it worked, and trying to get it accepted through the Google Play Store. And we did eventually do it, and it was the biggest relief. But the feeling of having your heart sink when you've got to fix that, going out to the consumer, and either Apple or Google go, no, you can't release this. It's like you're just your soul drops. It's like, what is going on? The same build that was accepted 5 days ago is no longer accepted. And what actually happened is that the build that was out in production was actually flagged as problematic. So someone had actually approved something that was incorrect. There was some incorrect settings in the settings files that we had. I guess the moral of the story, why I wanted to tell you this, is that this whole week was being hectic trying to get this build out. Then we had this issue right before Easter, so it was like, it was like everybody's Easter is going to be ruined, especially the people that are working on it. And in the current climate, it's like you don't want to be the one that makes the mistake that costs you customers, because at this point, especially with tech, it's a very, very fine game, so you got to be very careful. So for me, there was no question that I needed to get this fixed, and I needed to get it fixed now. So at the end of the day, it's funny because if it wasn't for the excitement and push, it would almost not feel like you were as as committed to the product. It was like, you got to do this. This is a challenge. You have to do this, and even though the challenge was self-created. It makes you wonder how, you put yourself out there and you validate your commitment to something based on these situations. So I guess the main takeaway here is that, even with good test suites and, a good selection subset of tests that you might have. Um, Unless you fully test something, you don't know. And in this case, it was like, I was shocked. I was like, how could we put ourselves in the situation where we are? We've got a product out in production that is problematic for a lot of users. And so, I still have to kind of absorb the situation and figure out what happened and how we can avoid that from happening again. Uh, there's got to be in this the bigger a product gets, the more careful you have to be with the changes that are deployed. Things like infrastructure and connectivity and some of the core functions need to have a more rigorous test process than, say, something like a UI change. So that's the story, is that you never know when something can go wrong, and you always have to be prepared, and you have to be committed that if you're responsible, that you're going to get it fixed. And that's the story for this week. I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Bye.